Hi, this is Lex, and welcome to the Fintech Blueprint. It's your podcast about fintech, decentralized finance, digital banking, investing, robo-advice, artificial intelligence, and all the other frontier technology that is transforming financial services. To get more content, like an illustrated transcript of this conversation in your inbox, subscribe at fintechblueprint.com. So without further delay, let's jump into today's episode. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. Today, I'm really excited for a conversation with Ivan Maryasin, who is the CEO and co-founder of Monite, which is an embedded finance company. And so, of course, we'll talk about what types of fintech can be embedded into APIs, how they're distributed. But we'll also talk about his journey through growth and through understanding distribution of various businesses. So with that, Ivan, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Lex. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start with sort of how you grew up professionally, because I think you have quite a unique background coming into, senior leadership in fintech. You spent a lot of time understanding how marketing works and how to think about distribution. Can you talk about some of your early experiences in your career?
Absolutely. It's actually a fun story. I remember when I was 13, 14, I picked up this book from my father's shelf, actually, or maybe even in a bookstore, called Marketing Will Kill Advertising. And at a time, actually, advertising was super big. It was, like all these fancy ads, etc. And I read this book, and then I read Philip Kotler's book on marketing, which is pretty much like the marketing Bible. And one thing I learned is that playing with people's perception in a positive way, you can actually bring impact around. And what I saw around me was that there were a lot of cool things, including what my parents were doing back then in a kind of construction services company. But unless you have it in front of people in the right shape and form, they will never get it. And then you end up having the market flooded with average things. And that was my first thought actually back then, saying like, I remember I said after these two books, I'm probably going to be the CEO of BMW. I always laugh at myself for that. But this was my first touch point with the growth topics. And then I was always kind of the sort of kid that didn't respect the rules, meaning that if I didn't have marketing classes at school, it didn't mean I have to wait. It just meant I have to get them somewhere else. So I actually started studying marketing after that, and I self-taught myself on many things, digital marketing, opened my marketing consultancy at the age of 17, consulted small businesses in Russia. And then I was actually studying in parallel to my bachelor's in Moscow in top US schools, figured out that this is actually where I belong because it's a lot closer business mentality to what I've got. And then when I moved to the States, I basically, after business school, and also during business school, I, of course, just started picking the great products I personally loved and helping these guys get their message in front of the right people in the right way. Because to me, it was the way to make the impact in the world. It's like really helping people who are after something I also believe in, supporting their mission, getting the word out there in front of the right audience. And I just continued this journey across different industries, but I can basically vouch for every single product I've ever worked with. And I never ever joined a company where I would say like, oh yeah, it's a nice salary. It's like, oh, it seems okay. It's like, I always joined them because I thought my marketing skills, my skills of getting this in front of the right people would actually change something in the world, even if it's something very small. So this is basically how I got to do, first marketing, then growth, which is a bit broader. And basically I continued in this journey thinking about these concepts holistically, just so basically trying to combine the aspect of building amazing products and bringing them to market.
I had a stint at Consensus as the chief marketing officer, so I'd love to talk a little bit about your journey and kind of how you delineate different strategies. So you started off just with the difference between marketing and advertising. And I kind of want to also ask about branding. If you were to kind of classify the difference between these practices, how would you describe it?
Sure. So I think advertising is largely referred to as something highly promotional. So this is where people think of like, oh, okay, look, so I just got this something, good looking, etc., to achieve, a specific objective. Usually it's more around brand visibility. It's about like getting a buzz in the market. It's actually most of the time, B2C when we think about advertising, but it is less so playing with, positioning or playing with the customer journey, playing with other things. To me, advertising is one of the channels in the customer journey that you would use to, basically achieve specific goals, such as visibility or maybe just like even fundraising or something else. Now, marketing to me is something more holistic. I would actually say that in recent years, I've come to use the marketing as a word less and growth as the word more. And the difference to me, and again, this is probably just my definitions, but the difference to me is in which parts of the funnel we would be addressing. So to me, marketing is usually thought and referred to as mostly top funnel. So where you're basically defining some sort of positioning, getting it out there and generating some sort of inbound business, or just running a sort of stack of different things across social media and other channels. But this is usually referred to as a top funnel. Whereas growth to me is a more holistic concept where you operate with two main assets. One is the funnel. So anywhere from like literally brand acknowledgement where advertising comes in to actually inbound funnel to actually sales funnel, working through product marketing, working through actually things that help business converts, and down to actually retention funnel, where you basically help guys like customer success, etc., retain business and be very efficient with what they do, activate customers and new features, etc. So a lot of these things. This is basically where I delineate and where I say growth is basically all of those things. Because when looking at growth, and that's the thing I really learned in Silicon Valley, it's like you have a North Star metric for the company. For different companies, it's different things. For most of B2B SaaS guys, they usually look at MRR, ARR metrics as some of the key ones. And if you look at those metrics and you're actually strategic, you're not focusing on one part of the funnel. You're focusing on multiple parts of the funnel. The second asset I always think of as kind of a delineation between maybe marketing growth, but also definitely between marketing and advertising, it's actually the customer journey mapping. It's literally applying one of those methodologies to understand how customers come to realize they have an issue. Then how do you look for the solution? How do they go about finding a solution? And the whole journey of like actually getting the solution, using the solution, discovering hiccups in the journey, etc. To me, the way I've always done growth is I've come into companies, actually many different industries, and I would actually start with this sort of approach. I would just map the customer journey, map out personas, and really understand what would growth mean for these guys. So before taking any job, I would actually run this sort of assessment myself and ask myself, like, is it more of like, inbound growth type of role? Is it more product marketing driven? Is it something else? And this is where I really try to find the split between growth and marketing, if that makes sense.
It's all about building systems, but then understanding the systems that wrap around where the value proposition is, like what the customer or the user is doing. If you're building systems in the abstract to push products, you're going to fail. If you're building systems around supply, you're going to fail. But if you're building systems around demand, you're going to succeed. And another thing that I find really interesting about like the evolution from the sort of Mad Men advertising voodoo positioning days to where we are today with community, with really complex user tracking and so on, is that so much of it is also dependent on our ability to digitally track people. Like we can shove pixels and cookies on every single computer in the world to figure out exactly actually how that demand behaves. So like the technology that we as marketers have to understand both at the individual level and at the aggregate level of a crowd and the demand they might have for different things is like such a large scale robot. There's so much digitization and look through into people's behaviors that if your company knows how to build around that, it's an incredibly unfair advantage. Is that characterization align with you? Do you agree, or how do you think about it?
Absolutely. I actually would go as far as saying that the capabilities of modern tracking and targeting and everything else are so wide that just if you compare the amount of companies and the amount of products they have to the talent pool of marketers or growth people who actually know how to do this, the gap is absolutely gigantic. which is why every year you still have companies that cannot figure out go to market. And it's not always for the reason that their product isn't great. It's sometimes just literally because they don't use growth technologies in the right way. I think there is a combination of factors that should always come together in order for people to discover you and buy and everything else. And basically putting this together is job of growth people in many ways together with sales. And I think there are a lot more factors than people usually think of. So that's why I kind of stopped using the word marketing as well, because many times when I would talk to people, they would actually tell me, "Oh, look, wait, where do we just like go get a few leads?" And it's not about leads, right? It's not about just getting leads. It's really about understanding the system that will drive your business. And to give you an example, I mean, some things are very online, but for instance, I'm based in Germany now. Some things here are really offline. And mapping customer journeys sometimes is literally the only way to capture demand. And we did have cases in fintech where one of the known lending companies actually got one of their main acquisition channels over fax in 2021. Another one got it through offline advertising in small cities where people have banking branches closing, and advertising in front of a closed bank branch proved to be pretty effective. And so you still have a lot of these things, right? So to your point, it's definitely something that we are behind on, but we are also, I would say, fundamentally behind on the system that should lie as a foundation of growth for every company.
Let's park that thread, which I think is going to be quite important. And then let's pull on the thread of fintech. So I know that around 2018, you started working at Penta, which is an online business bank. Were there other fintech kind of bits along your journey, or like how did you get engaged on getting interested in financial services and technology?
That's actually a great question. I think I had affinity for fintech since pretty early age. I was actually, while in the US, I was one of the first customers of, for example, like new investment technology, like robo-advisors, guys like Wealthfront or Betterment. And I've always been interested into how the backbone of this works. I've been following fintech for a while. And then I also come from Russia, which is obviously not the most popular country right now, but it's also one of the most developed fintech markets in the world. And the whole time I've been a user of guys like Tinkoff and similar products that were very advanced. So when I moved to Germany, one of my first questions was like, are you guys serious? Like, even in the US, which is not considered to be a hyper-developed fintech market back then, you actually get really nice, banking and financial products. In Germany, you literally have to go to the bank branch and fill out the paperwork. Like, come on, it's 2018. It's not like 1998. And so this was one of my early motivators when I moved to Germany to actually look at fintech. And then when Penta guys came around, they were very early. They were literally, a bunch of mostly foreigners actually trying to make banking right in Germany and in Europe. And with me, this journey very much resonated, especially because looking at the market as a growth person, I definitely saw a huge opportunity. And I definitely knew from a bunch of people who actually founded in Germany that running a business bank account is an absolute nightmare. So when this came around, I actually saw an opportunity to make a dent in the universe, just basically move the market in the right direction. And I would go as far as saying, like, when Penta came around, there were very, very few neobanks in the region. And we were definitely one of the first ones to move the needle. And because we moved the needle, the market accelerated big time, including traditional banks moving more digital and feeling pressure. So I think in that sense, that is exactly the definition of how I would see my mission as a growth person. It's actually changing the market dynamic. It's giving the great product to consumers, but it's also helping everyone else around us, all the competition and the bigger market understands that the bell is ringing now. You got to act now. The service has to change. The time has come.
I really identify that on my personal journey through the space. Like, I didn't start out in marketing. I started out in operating and focusing on how to persuade the next individual that I talk to. So you can also think about these as expanding skills out. So if you can figure out in a conversation with one human being how to find an argument for something they don't want to believe in, but you find an argument right on the edge and you get them to believe in it, right? So imagine you're talking to a hedge fund manager in 2010 about how robo-advice and small accounts are going to be the future of digital investing, right? Which is kind of nonsense to that person. And then you find that one sliver of a message that might persuade them. And then as an entrepreneur, you have to repeat that first with investors, and then with clients, and then with employees, and then eventually much more broadly in the positioning of your entire company to go out to customers. As you scale that up, you can get to a place where your activities are persuading a whole industry, right? Like you're able to argue for innovation or argue for digital transformation at a scale that is hitting multiple companies. And I think it's interesting to hear you describe it because you can kind of get to that result from different directions.
Absolutely. And it's actually funny because it's very challenging to find the angle, as you put it, where it would be simple enough for the market to actually take it. Like actually the best marketing messages are very, very simple. And especially moving a needle in a complex industry like fintech requires a hyper simplicity. It literally needs to be so straightforward that even people with developed patterns, like you described, will actually go and give it a shot. And I think in some industries it's easier than in others, but for us at Penta, it was fairly challenging when we started. I would say it wasn't impossible, but it was definitely challenging, especially because back then, a bank, like nobody knew what an online bank is. Like in Russia, we had Tinkoff for years. In Germany, we would have people calling our hotline just to check that we're real, like literally. They absolutely like the product, but they would just call to see that there is somebody picking up the phone and that the German that people speak sounds like German from Germany. To me, this was a complete shock because I was more used to scenarios like you launch a great product, it's a very clear USP, it's great. But the challenges we found were on a side that was completely unexpected. And then remapping customer journeys, we completely rebuilt the marketing strategy as well to address those pain points. And this is why now you can see a lot of new neobanks trying to enter Germany, like Kontos and the like, with a lot heavier financing than Penta ever had or spent on advertising. And the truth is that it's challenging exactly for these reasons. It's because the customer journey here and the customer preferences here will be very different, for example, from France or from Italy, from other countries. And that's why, a lot of sort of European expansion efforts in certain industries actually get stagnating just because these markets are so different.
Okay, so let's combine these and talk about Monite. What is it? How did it come together to be built? Tell us a little bit more about the company.
Sure. So when working at Penta, we were definitely after changing the way that business finance works for small companies. And we definitely accomplished a part of that mission by just giving them an easy to use bank account in the card. But speaking to all those, Penta and other small businesses, Penta customers and other small businesses, one thing that continues to hurt is that their finance operations or sort of finance processing internally is still pretty complex. And when I decoupled it and I kind of put it on the mental map, I saw that there were a lot more topics they're trying to take care of, like expense management, invoicing, payables automation, cash flow analytics, a bunch of different things. And if you look at a market, then the two alternatives they really have is really using either specialized tools, of which you would need 4, 5, 6, depending on what you're trying to do. But then it gets really expensive. They're not connected to each other, so you still run a reconciliation nightmare. And then the second option is using Excel, which is still what some people do in 2022. Actually, a large majority, I think, of a German market still does it for many, many things. And the idea then came to mind that with all those bank accounts and with all those softwares, the one thing that people always fail to accomplish is really to have a sort of one place where they can just automate it. And whenever you speak to a business owner, the two things they ask for is like, can it be simpler and affordable? And also ideally where I'm used to it. So when I started Monite, our idea was under my co-founder who built previously one of the biggest Russian SME neobanks, was basically to build on top of existing bank accounts. So basically build on top of open banking technology and offer this one-stop shop experience to small businesses out there, basically giving them access to all their accounts with a Revolut-like or like Penta-like interface, so neobanking interface, even for traditional accounts via open banking. And then basically including invoicing, payables, expense management, cash flow analytics, and a bunch of other things under the hood. So when they do things on Monite's platform, it's all automated. Now, over time, what we learned is that people love the automation bit, but they actually want it where they already are using something else. And this was very, very similar to what we know about Square and other companies like that progressing through their journey. So Square started in 2010 with a POS device. Then they developed into a platform where you literally, as a merchant, can do anything you want. And so what we saw is that SMEs, business owners in general, are asking for this type of approach. And what we did at Monite is we said, look, there's a lot of embedded finance technology. There will be a lot of people like barbershop apps, neobanks, marketplaces all over the market, B2B SaaS, neobanks, etc., converting over time to become platforms, to become B2B super apps. Now, they can embed payments, they can embed bank accounts and cards, but they cannot embed something that is really key to a business, which is financial workflows. And that is exactly what we started doing. So we basically said, instead of trying to ship the kind of one-size-fits-all platform to customers, why don't we ship an embedded technology that lets any neobank, any marketplace, any vertical B2B SaaS company offer compliant invoicing, payables automation, expense management, cash flow analytics to their customers inside their interface on the level of a top vertical player. And this is basically the same thesis that embedded finance brings to the market with more traditional finance products, such as accounts or cards. We do the same thing, but with finance automation workflows, such as invoicing or payables. So this is pretty much what Monite does today. We come to a sort of a neobank, again, the Penta-like neobank, and we say, look, why don't you supplement your offering with invoicing or payables automation so your customers can do banking plus all invoice management in one place. And then let's add more expense management bits to it. Let's add more robust cash flow analytics to it. What happens then is that customers finally have a choice of where they can use the one-stop shop functionality. Depending on the type of business they are, depending on a personal preference, they might do it in a Square-like barbershop app. They can do it in Amazon or Etsy if they're dropshippers or just trading there. And they can do it in a neobank if they prefer that. So you'll end up having basically people having access to the best financial technology, but in the place where they're used to. And you will end up having all these players like B2B SaaS guys, like neobanks, completely changing their unit economics because they can finally ship more value to a user without building all these things themselves, like Square or PayPal or other companies once did.
I want to go deeper into kind of defining accounts payable automation and invoicing and so on. Before we do that, can you give a little bit of a scale in terms of what kind of clients you have and sort of how much you're processing today?
Sure. So we're actually in an early go-to-market stage. We are now preparing for go live with the first few customers. And unfortunately, I'm under NDA for some of these deals, so I can't name names yet, but hopefully it's coming soon. What I would say is in this journey, our main targets right now are literally twofold. We are mainly talking to neobanks in the US and Europe, and we are talking to two types of software companies. One is Fintech applications. So anyone who runs something related to Fintech could be cash flow automation tools or could be FX or something else. And vertical SaaS propositions that are really targeted towards a specific customer. So sort of like, a 312 type proposition where you have a platform for, barbershops, construction workers, beauty professionals, whatever it is. So those are the targets.
One of the broader themes I do want to kind of pull out is that the word finance means so many things to so many different people. And early fintech was about taking some particular financial product, investments, lending, or something like that, a deposit account, and figuring out how to offer basically a financial product where the finance applies to the capital of either the human user or, the business, a small bank needs a deposit account. Over the last few years, what we're seeing is this investment theme and growing theme, which I think is profoundly valuable and interesting, which is the finance function of companies, right? So within a company, you'll have the marketing function and the legal function and the sales function and the product function. And then you'll have a finance function, which has workflows, largely manual workflows in large part in spreadsheets and accounting software and so on And it's that finance function that also connects into all the various financial instruments that the business needs, whether it's treasury or cash management or paying people, figuring out employee benefits, all of that stuff. And so we're seeing a lot of transformation in that finance function, and often it touches financial instruments as well, like payments. And I wanted to kind of just set that out to give more context around what you're talking about, because you're combining the automation of the finance function with the embedded finance theme, where the embedded finance theme is we're going to take financial products and put it into APIs so that instead of selling to consumers or to businesses, we're selling to developers who then integrate those financial products into features within a customer journey. So that's a lot of words from me, but I wanted to kind of lay that out and then ask you to open up a little bit more what accounts payable automation means, what invoicing actually means, like what are the things that you're kind of like replacing in the prior business, and maybe a little bit about, like you said, the customer flow itself.
Absolutely. So look, it's actually a great point you made about the maturity of finance function in companies. I think there was a great article actually in 2020 when we were just starting by Seema Umbel at A16Z, CFO Crisis. We actually discussed it with Seema sometime later. It's actually true that finance stack of the business hasn't changed as much as, for example, the stack for sales, marketing, and many other teams. And this leads to a weird situation in the market where still in 2022, there is a ton of manual work being done on all sorts of fronts. Now, the truth is that companies are very different. Many of them are still doing a lot of Excel, etc. Some of them are very advanced. And what we found working with SMEs is that there is just no one size fits all. There are like some patterns, but it's very hard to generalize in this market. Now, when it comes to what we do, so the notion is very simple. The notion is that the customers in the market are inherently very different and they have different processes. Those could be based on the company size, those could be related to their industry or something else. Now, the way they think about automation is also usually contextual to their business, which means that, for example, for some law firms, it might be a bit more logical to have invoicing functionality, not in QuickBooks, but rather in their legal platform where they operate all their contracts, where they see court decisions, and where they have all other information that feeds into invoices. And then, for many other companies, it could be just more logical to have, for example, their payables module within their bank account where they anyways pay from, but they just want to have proper overview, approval flows, and everything else. So what we do is we basically say, look, for the customers that any platform has out there, we're happy to give you 90% of product heavy lifting done, so you can offer compliant payables, receivables, or other things, but you just gotta really understand your customers very well and implement it in a way that makes sense for them. What we do specifically, let's take accounts payable as an example. What we do for this and other verticals is we really try to understand the user pains, which we also know because we worked with SMEs in the past. And then we basically build around those jobs to be done in a very flexible and API first way. So to be specific here, we go and build something that is comparable to a Bill.com or Million Payments or even like NetSuite Oracle type of solutions in the future, where we basically allow people, for instance, for payables, to gather all invoices in one place via upload, via forwarding, via different mailboxes, to run collaboration on these documents by basically having commenting function, to-dos, specific assignments that they can push between each other, and then creating all sorts of approval policies or processing policies where any organization from like literally a freelancer type of thing to a 500 people to a 5,000 people type of organization can literally mimic what they have written as an approval or some other policy and just put it in software inside the interface of the platform they're used to, and then basically run all these approvals and pay invoices out. So the part that we really do is the software part. We really don't touch anything that is related to getting licenses. And then we also offer payment rails where, for instance, for payables, we run a multi-rail for payments. You can release payments with open banking. You can release with card payments. You can release with your own bank account payments. Or, for example, in the future, also with FX, BNPL, and other things. Then we also integrate technologies like OCR, on a multi-rail sort of mentality where we basically say, look, we have multiple OCR engines that get applied in specific way based on confidence score. And then essentially you don't need to worry which exact engine gets used. It's just going to work. So if you were to put simple, what we do is we sort of like decouple products like Build.com. We make them hyper modular and we basically put them on steroids. So they are really, really robust. But then any organization, for example, if you serve freelancers, you would take this and you would use a fraction of the functionality because you just don't need all of it. Now, if you serve more complex organizations and your customers are typically like 300, 500 people companies, then you would probably use most of the functionality we offer, plus, more payment means, etc. So this is pretty much our offering to companies. And building this in-house means that you're pretty much trying to build a sort of like a Melio payments type of thing, a Build.com type of thing. It's very costly, but more than anything, it's hyper complex because the amount of edge cases and things you need to cover in this journey is actually insane. So when I explain it, it sounds simple. When you actually get doing this, there are so many things to take care of that I think I always hear from tech people and CTOs we talk to, Fintech is all about edge cases. It's not about the happy path, it's about the unhappy path.
So this is something actually quite profound. When I look at your positioning on your site, it's to become a full operating system for your clients. That's the value proposition. So it's a value proposition where you're telling companies that want to be a financial operating system, of which there are very many companies these days who want to play kind of between commerce and payments and banking, and kind of they want to take this positioning of a financial operating system. And you're telling them that you will allow them to add finance automation within their experience. That's a go-to-market innovation, isn't it?
It definitely is. So I think what I've seen on the market so far is bits and pieces of technology, but not complete workflows. This is why we actually took a completely different approach. And we said, look, let's first embed workflows and then embed specific financial technology. So if we go talk to, let's say, a barbershop app, they would probably first embed the payables workflow. And then they'll say, look, but people anyways, like barbershops anyways, manage their invoices with us. So why don't we offer them a bank account and a card? And then they can also become a neobanking sort of proposition. So this whole notion of companies becoming fintechs, I think, is largely going to be based on their ability to add these specific workflows that are actually essential to the business. It's a lot harder to just give a bank account and a card to people when you don't really have a workflow, because they'll tell you like, look, I have a bank account and a card. But if they really manage all their invoices with you, it's a very straightforward choice to just have a new release method from your own account, to just get more cash back from the cards if you pay these invoices with a card. And this is what we're trying to bring to market. And then there's one bit that we didn't cover, and we're not too vocal about it because it's just coming to be. But there is a big inefficiency I've observed in the market where I know of dozens of amazing companies building financial products, lending, factoring, BNPL, etc. Their main issue is go to market. It's very, very difficult for them to scale because unlike all marketing data, it's very difficult to know when a company actually needs factoring or actually needs some other sort of financial product. And when small businesses especially realize that, it's kind of too late, and many of them will just not get the right conditions. So what we're trying to enable with our workflow strategy is a scenario where we're not really selling, let's say, an invoice feature to a neobank. We're actually selling order to cash workflow to a neobank, meaning that in the future, the scenario we want to have is that I, as a customer of a neobank, I'm sending a quote out. Once this quote is accepted, I can do a credit check on a customer with one click. If the credit check is not super good, I'll buy invoice insurance the moment I send the invoice. And then if I didn't buy it and my invoice isn't paid, I'll be able to advance a payment via BNPL, get factoring service in a click, get debt collection service in a click, all within the neobank's interface, all powered by us, basically combining our software functionality that we basically built in-house and the system of data triggers that connects to specific API-first partners that provide, let's say, factoring or BNPL or other technology. And in this way, you basically get a customer having everything in a single application. Depending on who they are, it would be a different application. And then you also solve almost the complete go-to-market problem for specialized financial services, because as Monite covers hundreds of thousands and millions of businesses out there, we will know data triggers wise who needs what when, because it's going to be fully data driven and contextual. So the moment your invoice is actually not paid, you do need factoring. Now, you don't need to Google for that when it's already too late and you missed it by so many weeks. You just get a one click of a button at the right time. And we want to really operate this whole flow to basically help fintechs, B2B SaaS, marketplaces have completely different unit economics, help their users to get all the value in one place, and then help specialized fintech providers like lending guys, BNPL guys, factoring guys focus on what they do and not really have such a big go-to-market problem.
Absolutely. I'm curious if you were to project this out, and for better or worse, I now often bring a crypto lens to everything, or a decentralization lens. So in thinking about some of the industry problems or industry structure of financial services, when you approach things from a Web3 perspective, one of the motions that you often do is try to figure out when something could be a protocol. And a protocol, other than sort of just the fuzzy voodoo marketing term, to me means a public good that is a natural horizontal monopoly, right? So horizontal meaning it covers the whole industry, such that, for example, all financial functions should just be open source APIs that everybody can use, right? So because over time they aggregate so much integration, they become the standard and they become horizontally monopolistic in a positive way. Like it's the thing that we all maintain. And then the second thing is thinking about it as a protocol that's got a lot of stakeholders and people contribute to it, people derive value from it, and so on. And I think a lot of what software is doing is taking human workflows, which are very local just by the nature of the human animal, and making it into software, and then software scales infinitely horizontally. And you want to build it in such a way that it's a public good in a horizontal fashion. I don't mean to imply that what you're doing is building a protocol, but I wonder more about the strategy question about, is it reasonable to think that some of these functions that used to be trapped in software, that used to be trapped in companies, like, is there natural endpoint to be melted down into code and then kind of prices driven to near zero, but then have control of the entire market, kind of like, Plaid has done for data aggregation and Stripe has done for payments? Or like, what's the industry structure you imagine in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. And unfortunately, also, we do have a lot of things in the works that will move the needle, but unfortunately, I can't speak about them yet. Now, in terms of the industry future, I mentioned, so my general thinking about this is that decentralization many times comes after there's been a proper centralization. I would actually argue that when it comes to finance docs and processing, there is actually no centralization that has happened yet. Like, people still produce some sort of PDFs in one place, send it over email. It's just a manual nightmare for many, many years, and it hasn't changed much. Whereas, for example, in payments or banking, you already got like standardized schemes and protocols, and people really, really use them. E-invoicing adoption is just starting in some markets, but it's in like really early stages. And I think this is just like the first pieces we're seeing of centralization efforts. So that said, I think the future, I imagine, is definitely that many of the things that people do today will be absolutely fully eliminated because they won't be needed. In the end of the day, like just thinking about the logic of it, people still want to make key decisions and they still want to basically be involved in specific actions, but the rest they just don't want to do. So actually, when we talk to people about this, it's one of the unsexiest topics for them. Like running admin, running finances, they really hate it. Like they really get angry even talking about it. So I think over time, everyone will expect that some of these things get not only automated, but even probably intelligent to an extent. Like, for instance, if you make a typo on the invoice and somebody's requesting this to be fixed, probably within a certain margin of error, you can do this with AI, fully automatically get this invoice paid without involving a human being. And then there will be, decisions where you actually have to confirm that this works. I think the second trend we're going to see is that many things that were enterprise only will start moving down market. That's one of the missions we have as well. Like, for instance, all startups and all small companies and even the freelancers, they have contracts according to which they receive invoices. The difference between an enterprise and a smaller company would be that an enterprise has a system in place for procurements that can connect a contract to an invoice and automatically mark it as approved. The SME will actually go dig up the contract on their computer or in Google Drive, check the contract manually, and then only basically do this whole thing manually, which will easily take 15 minutes. I think more bits and pieces will be coming here. And over time, I think the definition of human involvement in this process will change. It will take a significant amount of time, though, because finance processing seems to be one of the most conservative functions out there. And I would also say that many of the things we do are closely connected to payments, because in the end of the day, payments is actually almost the end of every flow. So there, I would definitely imagine seeing more sort of decentralization and alternative rails coming to be also into our workflows when it comes to payment release, when it comes to cross-border payments, etc.
Thank you for taking us through that and for taking us through the company journey. If our audience wants to learn more about you as well as about the company, where should they go?
The easiest way to connect with me is over LinkedIn. So feel free to just send me a connect request or ping us via the website if you're interested in the solution. We're very quick in getting back. I just want to say for the folks out there, we have a pretty overwhelming amount of requests for a very small business side of the team. So if we take time to come back, sorry about that. But LinkedIn is really the best way to reach me.
Fantastic. Ivan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Lex. Been a pleasure.
Hi, everyone. That's it for this week's episode of the Fintech Blueprint. For more technical deep dives into all things fintech and decentralized finance, check out fintechblueprint.com and grab a free subscription to the newsletter. This is Lex, and I'll see you next time.